I never realized how much I depended on my phone until the day it completely stopped working. Like most people, I carried my phone everywhere. It woke me up in the morning, showed me the weather, helped me answer emails, reminded me about meetings, paid for my coffee, and guided me through unfamiliar streets. I rarely thought about any of those things because they happened automatically, every single day. My phone had quietly become part of almost everything I did. I only understood how important it had become after the battery died on one of the busiest days of my year. Everything started on a Tuesday morning. I had an important presentation at work, a lunch meeting with a client, a visit to the bank after work, and dinner with two university friends whom I had not seen for almost 6 months. Every hour of the day had already been planned. Before leaving my apartment, I checked my calendar, replied to several messages, and ordered a taxi through an app. While waiting downstairs, I noticed that my phone battery was already at 32%. I remembered forgetting to charge my phone the night before because I had fallen asleep while reading a book. I thought about going back upstairs for my charger, but the taxi had already arrived. I told myself that 32% would be enough. After all, I could always charge my phone later at the office. The morning became busier than expected. During the taxi ride, my manager called to discuss several last-minute changes to the presentation. By the time I reached the office, the battery had dropped to 24%. I plugged my charger into my computer, but another problem appeared almost immediately. The cable had stopped working. I tried different USB ports, unplugged, and connected it again several times, but nothing happened. My phone showed the charging symbol for only a second before disconnecting again. I borrowed another cable from a coworker, but someone else needed it before the meeting started. I decided to wait until lunchtime and charge my phone then. The presentation lasted almost 2 hours. Everything went surprisingly well, but my phone continued losing power while sitting in my pocket. When the meeting finally ended, the battery had fallen to 12%. I quickly searched for a wall charger, but every socket in the meeting room was already occupied by laptops. I laughed quietly and promised myself that I would charge my phone during lunch. Once again, I believed I still had enough battery. After leaving the office, I walked toward a nearby restaurant where I planned to meet the client. On the way there, I used my phone to check the address because I had never visited the restaurant before. The map loaded slowly, and by the time I arrived, the battery had dropped to 7%. During lunch, I placed my phone beside me, hoping to find an electrical outlet nearby. Unfortunately, the restaurant was crowded, and every available socket was already in use. The client arrived a few minutes later, and I completely forgot about charging my phone. After lunch, I stepped outside and looked at the screen again. 5% remained. I finally understood that I had made a mistake. I searched for the nearest convenience store, hoping to buy a portable charger, but none were available. Then I remembered that the bank I needed to visit was in a part of the city I rarely visited. Normally, I would simply open a map and follow the directions. Without enough battery, that would soon become impossible. I started walking toward the subway station while checking the map one last time. I memorized the street names as carefully as I could. 2 stops on the subway, turn right after the bookstore, continue straight into the large post office, then cross the street. The route seemed simple enough. As I reached the subway entrance, my phone vibrated with a warning that the battery was low. Less than a minute later, the screen turned black. The battery died. I pressed the power button several times, even though I already knew it would not help. The phone remained completely silent. Suddenly, I was standing in the middle of a busy city without a map, without my calendar, without my contact list, and without any way to call someone. The strange thing was not panic. It was surprise. I had become so accustomed to having instant information that I had forgotten people managed perfectly well before smartphones existed. I took a deep breath and entered the subway station. Fortunately, I still remembered the correct line from the map. 20 minutes later, I arrived at the station nearest the bank. Once outside, however, everything looked unfamiliar. The bookstore I remembered from the map was nowhere in sight. I walked 2 blocks in one direction, then another block in the opposite direction. Every street looked almost identical. For the first time in years, I was truly lost. Normally, I would simply check my phone for a few seconds. This time, I had no choice but to solve the problem differently. I found a small bakery and decided to ask for help. The woman behind the counter listened patiently while I explained that my phone battery had died and that I was trying to find the bank. She smiled, pointed toward a side street, and explained that I had walked in the wrong direction after leaving the subway. According to her instructions, the bank was only 5 minutes away. Her directions were perfect. I found the place almost immediately. While leaving the bank, another problem appeared. I had promised to meet my university friends at a restaurant across town at 7 o'clock. Normally, I would use my phone to check the address or send a message if I was running late. Now, I could do neither. I realized I remembered the restaurant's name, but not its exact location. I thought carefully. One of my friends had mentioned that the restaurant stood beside a large city park. I knew roughly where that park was, but not the exact street. Once again, I needed another solution. This time, I entered a small bookstore and explained my situation to the cashier. He kindly allowed me to use the store's public telephone. I smiled with relief until I realized I did not remember any of my friends' phone numbers. For years, my contacts had lived only inside my phone. I knew my parents' numbers because I had memorized them as a child, but none of my closest friends' numbers remained in my memory. The realization felt embarrassing. The cashier noticed my expression and suggested another idea. He opened a paper city map from behind the counter and helped me locate the park. Together, we searched the nearby streets until we found the restaurant. It was about 15 minutes away on foot. I thanked him sincerely and began walking. The evening sun was beginning to disappear, and the streets were becoming quieter. Without music playing through my phone or constant notifications interrupting my thoughts, I noticed details I usually ignored. A violin player performed near the entrance to the park. Children chased pigeons across an open square. An elderly couple sat on a bench sharing ice cream while watching people walk past. I had probably passed similar scenes many times before without paying attention because my eyes had always been focused on a screen. When I finally reached the restaurant, my friends were already waiting. They joked that I had disappeared because I had not answered any messages during the afternoon. I explained that my phone battery had died and told them everything that had happened since lunchtime. They laughed at first, but then each of them admitted having similar fears. One friend confessed that he would not know how to reach his own office without GPS. Another realized she could remember only 2 phone numbers by heart. During dinner, something unexpected happened. Since none of us placed our phones on the table, the conversation felt different. We talked continuously for almost 3 hours without anyone stopping to check notifications or reply to messages. We remembered funny university stories, discussed future plans, and laughed much more than usual. At one point, I realized that my dead phone had accidentally created one of the most enjoyable evenings I had experienced in months. After dinner, one of my friends drove me home. As soon as I entered my apartment, I connected my phone to a charger. A few minutes later, the screen came back to life. More than 30 notifications appeared almost immediately. Emails, social media updates, news alerts, shopping promotions, and several missed calls all arrived together. For a moment, I simply looked at them without touching the screen. Earlier that day, I had believed my phone was absolutely necessary for everything. Yet somehow I had completed every important task. I had found the bank, attended my meetings, met my friends, and returned home safely. None of those things had happened exactly as planned, but they had happened. Over the next few days, I kept thinking about the experience. I realized that the most stressful part had not been the dead battery itself. The real problem was how dependent I had become on one small device. I no longer remembered important phone numbers. I trusted maps instead of paying attention to streets. I depended on reminders instead of remembering appointments. My phone had slowly replaced many small skills that I once used naturally. That weekend, I made several changes. I bought a reliable portable charger and kept it in my backpack. I also wrote the phone numbers of my parents, my closest friends, and my workplace inside a small notebook that I carried with me. Finally, I began paying more attention whenever I visited new places. Instead of following GPS without thinking, I looked at street names, landmarks, and buildings so I could remember them later. Perhaps the biggest change was psychological. I stopped feeling anxious whenever I left my phone in another room. Occasionally, I even went for short walks without taking it at all. At first, those walks felt strange. Then they became surprisingly relaxing. I listened to the sounds around me instead of notifications. I noticed flowers, architecture, and conversations that I would normally miss. Looking back now, I am almost grateful that my phone battery died on such an important day. At the time, it felt like a disaster. I worried about getting lost, missing appointments, and losing contact with people. Instead, the experience reminded me that I could still solve problems without immediate digital help. I could ask for help when I needed directions. I could find the place by paying attention to people and landmarks instead of only following a blue line on a screen. Today, I still use my smartphone every day. I still rely on maps, calendars, and messaging apps because they genuinely make life easier. The difference is that I no longer believe I am helpless without them. Every few weeks, I deliberately leave my phone at home while taking a short walk or visiting a nearby cafe. Those small moments remind me that technology is a useful tool, not something that should completely replace my own attention and memory. Whenever I see the battery warning appear now, I smile instead of feeling anxious. I simply charge my phone before it becomes a problem. More importantly, I remember the busiest Tuesday of my year, when my battery died, I got lost, asked strangers for help, found every place I needed to visit, and discovered that sometimes losing one convenience allows us to rediscover abilities we forgot we already had.